All right, here we go. And so it's Monday night all over again, and we welcome you to Zoom in on a fresh conversation with Mr. Ezriyah Ben Ernst. Zoom in on a fresh conversation is sponsored by Eyeless Diamonds, LLC, and brought to you by the Fresh Book Festival 2021, which will be held in the city of Daytona Beach. 7, 8, 9 January 2021. We're still keeping our fingers crossed. I think our numbers are coming way down in Florida. So by, maybe December, we'll make a decision one way or the other. Special thanks to my son, Taylor, who gives this Taylor's Tunes for the Fresh Conversation theme song. Please silence your cell phones so that it won't go off while Mr. Ernst is speaking. And we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to a fresh conversation. An evening, Ezra. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I am so excited. I'm going to put you on speaker view, so you are dead in the middle.
Right. Right I'm sorry. Yeah?
In the night record?
I am. I'll be staying here tonight. I'm on an interview right now, so I'm sorry. No worries, brother. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm still near the mechanics. Yes, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
This invite. Yeah. What can I tell you? I've traveled quite a bit. I'm a one-time Palm Coaster in its early heyday back in the 90s.
That's one of my first questions. So tell us about how you got to Palm Coast from Chicago.
So originally, I was born in New York. So I went from New York, Brooklyn to Chicago, which is Evanston, right on the border. And then my parents moved us down. They tricked me. I thought we were going to New York for the summer, but I should have known something was up when they let me pack my Nintendo.
Right.
Next thing you know, we're at that McDonald's over on Palm Coast Parkway. And then next thing you know, we were living in the F section, which I loved because we were out there in the woods.
It was the woods then, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was woods back then, woods and creeks and deer and all type of animals that I didn't, never run into in the city of Chicago or in Evanston or Des Plaines. So I loved it. I loved growing up in Florida around that time and, riding my bike all over that town from the P section to Bird of Paradise, which Who does that now, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually during COVID, everybody does it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's kind of
Palm Coast has changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Really. It's, when I moved here in 94, 5, there were 25,000 people. Now there's over 100,000 people. So
Palm Coast, Flagler, massive.
It really has grown, yeah. And you went to Wadsworth Elementary?
I went to Wadsworth. I also went to Bunnell Elementary, and I went to Buddy Taylor Middle School.
Oh my, yeah. So tell us how you
St.
got
Joe's
from where Palm Coast to Hawaii and then end up on the West Coast. How did that happen?
Okay, so I'm a physicist by trade. I still do work with all branches of the military as a contract, provider. And so I was working, I left Florida, went up to school in Illinois.
Okay, Ezriyah,
and then
wait a minute. Yes. You don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be a physicist. How did that happen?
I actually wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be like Bill Cosby and deliver babies on the Cosby Show.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I was always geared towards the sciences in that way. And then my mother was a radiologist. She worked at Ormond Memorial Hospital.
Okay.
She left and went back up to Chicago. She was working over at Lutheran General and Evanston Hospital and St. Francis. So these are all in the Chicago area vicinity. And so I was inclined to work with radiation. And that ended up happening in college. So I went to school for engineering. I switched majors a couple times and ended up being interested in radiation physics. And I graduated with a degree in radiation physics, which led me to working in the nuclear field. Yeah.
And so you left college. Which college was that? University?
I went to Eastern Illinois University, which is in Charleston, Illinois, close to Champaign-Urbana. Mm-hmm. More people tend to know more about Champaign-Urbana.
Right.
And then from there, I took a job working in the environmental sector in a place called Festus, Missouri, working at a former fuel cycling facility. It's just a mouthful, but the industry opened its doors to me and I walked right in. And that ended up taking me to, when that project ended, I ended up taking a job with a firm out in East Hartford, Connecticut. And from there, I ended up traveling up and down the East Coast and various places in the Midwest. And then we had a job that took me to Hawaii for a short term. And at the end of that project, I remember I was second in charge, and my higher upper said, you know what, pay attention because I'm not coming back here. So if we continue this project, you'll be the one, if we move back. And so I ended up going back less than a year later. That was 2008. And then the next thing, 7 years had passed and I was married again and, living the Hawaii life, still working with the military until I decided to quit.
Did you like Hawaii? You love Hawaii.
I loved Hawaii. I still love Hawaii. Yes. Hawaii. I tell everyone that I lived in Palm Coast in Florida, was born in Brooklyn, but I became a man in Hawaii.
Okay. Grew up and sowed all your wild oats and got all your heartburn and heartache and did all that in Hawaii,
that,
right?
All of that. A lot of heartache in Hawaii for sure, but a lot of love and connecting with the land and ancestors.
We all leave heartache and heartburn, wherever we are. It's just how you recuperate from it that makes it, worth the journey. And so I want to talk a minute about, and it's not one of your questions, when I worked with the Justice Department, we had a real problem with indigenous people in Hawaii with methamphetamine. Is that still a problem?
Yes.
Oh.
It's still a problem. I was actually speaking with one of the mechanics here is from the islands too. So I noticed his pigeon coming out a little bit and I was like, Fred, are you from the islands? And he's like, oh, so we got to talking and he was there back in the 80s, but it is a problem. I have a nonprofit out there and I was working with the homeless from various different islands in the South Pacific, as well as the local population. And it was an issue. It still is an issue.
Yeah, that's too bad, right? It's just, okay, Monica, are you clapping or you want a question? I'm not sure. That's a clap? Yay, okay.
And for this interview, I just want to put it out there. Like, I'm open to you asking any questions, even if it's not, anything new comes up.
I meant to say something to you before about my work in Hawaii and the indigenous people and how I was astounded at the way the methamphetamine had destroyed whole families. And it really was heartbreaking to see some of the environments that they were living in and the homeless camps. And so, I know everything happens for a reason in the universe, but when you look at that island and you know how beautiful it is, and then you see the people who are indigenous to the island living the way they do, it's really, really hard. That's all I'm saying. It was, it was hard to palate even back in the 80s and the 90s. So I was hoping some improvement had happened in that time frame. But you're saying
it's still difficult. But I do believe there has been some improvement. A lot of the elders and the youth have started to come together to preserve their culture. And, I don't know if you know, but Hawaii is still a kingdom. It was an annexed kingdom by the United States, but their kingdom is still in place.
Oh, I didn't know
and
that.
They still have, so a lot of people don't know that, which is beautiful. And, with all the stuff that was going on Big Island with Mauna Kea, and, just the way that they stood up for themselves. It was Hawaiian culture that opened my eyes and had me curious to get back into what my culture is as even an indigenous African man as well. So that was the beginnings.
Yeah, that was the beginning of your third eye opening up. Is that what we call it? Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say that.
Yeah. You have to have a special spiritual awakening for that, just because we have so much minutia, right? So okay. So when we decide that there's more to the universe than just the energy that you see, but the energy that you feel and the energy that you can't see, right? So it takes a minute to get there. And and you can't talk about it with everybody because they kind of look at you crazy. But I know this. I definitely do understand. Yeah. So tell us about, I had a question here about how you were currently in a long distance relationship, but that's your second marriage, right? Did your
This
first
is actually
third
my
marriage?
third marriage.
Oh, God
Yes,
bless
yes,
you. You should answer that question.
yes. I believe I have been increased. Yeah.
Yeah, I put a question on Facebook today that says, "What would it take for you to get married again?" You know what that question is. You need to answer that for me,
For
because if you
me,
had it three
I can.
times, then you kind of can answer that question, right?
I've been through some ups and downs with this whole thing, and the one thing it took is for me to one be honest with myself. Right? What do I want in life? Do I want to have relationship? What am I willing to do for relationship? How clear did I want to become about what's important to me, and also not what I expect from a partner, but what I can bring into the relationship, which comes with expectations that I can speak to. But for me, it's been a journey of really connecting with myself. I actually married myself while in Bali. I was living in Indonesia and had a self-marrying ceremony, which I almost avoided, and that's when I realized, wow, I've made all these commitments to everyone else and I've never committed to myself. And I think that opened up the door for me to move forward. And so my partner and I, we met long distance over Instagram of all things.
Right.
And we ended up connecting again in Indonesia. My wife's in Australia. And, there's just been a lot of certainty in the relationship and also a lot of communication. So I don't come into this like a spring chicken, so to say,
Right,
just
right.
because it's not that I was married for a long time in those marriages, but I did cover a lot of ground. And
Well,
I wanted
I
to,
think you find out at some point what you will render and what you will surrender. Right.
yes,
In a
beautifully said.
relationship,
Yeah.
right? We had that question last Friday night on our singles Zoom, and it was very interesting. The difference between what a man would render and what a man would surrender, than a woman would
I would
render.
have loved to be a part of that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I would
was
have loved.
pretty interesting. So, what do you think you surrendered for the relationships that you had?
In the past, or just for this one here?
No, in
I
the
think
past.
I had to surrender a lot of pride. And I'm also an intimacy coach. So I wanna make sure I'm taking a lot of my own medicine. It's
Right.
easy to, present yourself in a certain way to the world, but what I did was I tend to go in and try to take my medicine first before I say anything to anyone and sit with things for close to a year. And so there was a lot of pride in digging into mistakes that I made and just, looking for accountability on my part, and also uh, not wanting to be a martyr. So I didn't come into this relationship like a martyr. I didn't come into this relationship. Of course, we all have wounds, and there's wounds that you don't find out until you start to navigate with someone.
Right.
But my
Exactly.
perspective on navigating and opening up was different, because in the process of all that, I recognized that although as a man I do penetrating, but the woman also penetrates your heart. And so for me, it's like recognizing, okay, yes, I will guard this heart, but also with the right person, I'd like to open up the door and be vulnerable and allow that to be penetrated. So I had to drop a lot of that pride, and I've experienced some real beauty along that, and trusting that this heart can heal no matter what happens to it, which I'm finding is true.
Yeah, but you have to get there.
You got
That's
to
a
get there,
process.
and it's a walk. Yeah.
That's definitely a process. So tell us about
Yeah.
transformative learning and healing. I really
Okay.
didn't have any notion of it until I went to your website. So tell us about that.
All right. So the website, is Lakoji. Hopefully you can hear me with the motorcycle in the background. It's Lakoji Gatherings, and Lakoji is all about love, courage, justice, and experiential integration. And along the process is transformation. So transformational healing is what we do naturally, but just to set up a nice space for it, to come in with intention, to allow yourself to be seen and to be heard. This is where the transformation occurs, is the being witnessed. So many of us are in situations where we can be close with someone, but we're not as close as we could be. Now, for me as an intimacy coach, it's creating spaces of intimacy for people to get closer to themselves, closer to their partners, closer to the environment. I personally prefer that order, but if by law of correspondence, in whatever direction you go, you can still add on to the two. It's like cultivating discipline.
When you are coaching intimacy, right?
Yes.
Do you find it difficult not to be not physically intimate, but spiritually intimate with the person that you're coaching, or is that a necessity?
I'm open to, in the sessions, I call it coaching, but really it's co-creating with someone else. So as opposed to the typical therapy where, you know, you're sitting someone on a couch per se, and they're going through their motions, this is a co-creative process, and we're looking for solutions together. So what I'm doing is actually committing to the person who decides to work with, you know, clients from age, now I can say 18, even though I prefer a little bit older, all the way up to 80, you know, and it's just creating that space. So I'm open to the spiritual in any time of mixing and seeing, because I'm here to actually witness you. You know, I may have a wife who's never been able to speak to a part of herself and share that with her husband. And so what I provide is that masculine presence to where you can let it be seen and honored. And then now we also kind of dig into, now how will you be able to cultivate that in the relationship that matters to you the most, which maybe is.
Do you do one-on-one first and then bring the couples in, or do you do
I prefer to
couples
do
first?
one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah, I could do couples therapy, but my preference is to at least have 3 sessions with one person, like with them by themselves, because I need to see who they are separate from each other. And yeah, I really, really cherish one-on-one.
When you're in a one-on-one situation in this transformative healing, how is it that you then take that energy and make sure that the person's partner receives it?
Well, in the one-on-one, it's really about the person first.
Right.
The partner is going to receive it because, you know, I do energy work as well. So the individual is having a transformation. And by virtue of them being in proximity to their partner, whatever little change you make within yourself, you're going to start to see that by what they call the law of correspondence in your entire world. So after each session, I tell people, you want to take about 7 days and be in the observer position, meaning take notes and observe all the weirdness that's going to happen and that's turning over in your life as the observer. And then we can check back and let's maybe break some of that down. But I think the important point for them as they go back into their household is to stand back a little bit, because a lot of where people are coming from is a reactive space as opposed to a space of observation, which creates awareness, which then, you know, helps to create a lot of change.
When you go through this transformative process and the couples or partners or situationships, whatever you want to call it, come back together. I mean, you know, because people have all kind of different.
This is it.
Right. They have all
And the
kinds
entanglements. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you ever find that they come back to you and say, we found out who we were and we're not supposed to be together?
Yeah, that happens as well. What's
And,
important, again,
go ahead.
What I'm emphasizing in this is really the important thing is to find your personal truth. And so, you know, the thing is when they find their truths, they're also finding it in a space where they can honor each other. It's not an ugly thing. It's a really beautiful thing to come into your truth and to even have navigated in a space with another person and recognize that. So they may not stay together in relationship, but really what's happening is their relationship's taken on a new form. And they get to navigate that, and we'll have seen that together as well.
So who introduced you to transformative healing and education?
Well, I think it's really something that's been a part of my journey as someone who gathers people all the time. But I could say, I mean, and it's funny that Oahu is the gathering place as well for all the islands. That's considered the gathering place. I was actually initiated by a shaman who I was dating at the time in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai. He initiated me with plant medicine as a co-facilitator. And then I also went off to Africa.
Ezriyah, a lot of people don't know who a shaman is, so let them understand that that's like we don't want to call them the medicine man or woman. We want to call them the elder of the community.
The elder.
Okay, I don't know.
You can say the elder or healer. I think it falls more in line with healer, and they're kind of like the everything in a group. So for us, with the African tradition, perhaps every tribe had a group. Every family even had a person who's the healer. And we carry those traditions with us where, you know, grandma had certain remedies, mom knows certain things, you know, and they're like, each person has their piece of the pot to make the village work in a coherent, cohesive, and harmonious way.
Right.
And so I ended up dating this woman, and I guess, reintroduced me to this aspect of myself. And then I went off on a journey, and that was after my second marriage, of, I called it unifying myself. And so along the process, then I came in contact with more experiences like that, quite a few, and ended up going to Africa, to Gabon specifically, for a healing, but also being initiated into that process a little bit more deeply.
And once you became transformed, how did your relatives, your colleagues, your parents, I don't know if you have brothers and sisters, siblings, how did
I
they,
have siblings.
yeah, how did they receive, it's a new you, right? Basically.
It's a new me.
Yeah.
So even the name Ezriyah, I've been throwing a lot of new me in their faces since I left the States and went off to Hawaii.
Okay.
So I became a Hebrew Israelite, and this name came to me, and I took on my Hebrew name, and my birth name is Derek Ernst Albert. So my full name would be Ezriyah Derek Ernst Albert. Ben Ernst means son of Ernst. So I honor my father by making sure that it's known that I am the son of Ernst Albert, who coincidentally lives in Palm Coast. And I think I was met with a lot of friction, but they tried. And I recognized that they were trying. And from where I was coming from, I was, at a point of being suicidal and working through depression and working through those relationships. So I really put a lot of effort into setting my own boundaries and taking myself through my own rites of passage to see what is it to be a man in a way that's resonant for me in this world. And then to present that to them and give them time to digest it, but also not necessarily back down. And so that they've been actually more receptive than I expected in the recent years. But in the beginning, I know it was a bit much for them.
Is that because you were
A lot of
younger?
my family.
You were younger,
Yes,
and they
definitely.
thought you didn't
The
understand.
oldest.
You're the oldest. You're the
I'm the
oldest.
oldest. I'm
Oh,
38.
okay.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
be 39 this year, and my siblings are about 5 years younger than me, between 4 and
Okay.
5 years, depending on the
Okay.
time of year.
So you're the
Yeah,
oldest, and your younger brothers and sisters are looking at you and the way that you present yourself. And so that was, usually it's a flip thing. You're the youngest and the older people are looking at you.
yeah,
But now for you,
yeah,
it's the youngest looking at you in a way that some people just don't understand, right? In your family.
yeah. But I'll give it to them. They tried, and I feel like my brother and I have got to spend some time with him, and so there's a real beautiful rapport there. My father actually came with me when I went to Africa for the healing, and he
Oh,
initiated with me as well. So we went through that rites of passage as men, as brothers, but as father and son as well. We're like the only two from this side of the globe, African Americans, quote unquote, going back to this area to go do that. So it was a really beautiful experience, which brought us closer together. It's opened the door for some unity, much deeper unity.
so tell me about becoming an Israelite. Is that what you said? I'm sorry. What was it?
Yes, a Hebrew Israelite.
Yeah, tell me about that.
That was a beautiful process. I was really, I was raised in a Catholic family, Haitian and Cuban. So, there's the Haitian Cuban, like there's that strong Catholic presence. And then I went to Mother Seton, I believe in Palm Coast,
You
and
did?
also went to Catholic school. I did. Yeah, I went to Mother
Yeah,
Seton. I had
yeah.
my confirmation there,
Uh-huh.
and I went to St. Joe's Academy in St. Augustine and graduated from there. I loved the study of theology, and I just remember after my first divorce and then my journey into the wild dating and then meeting my second partner, I believe she was trying to push me off and saying, hey, if you want to kick it with me, you come to a Bible study. But I actually was hungry to know about the Bible. So, I'd show up and she'd be like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm here. But I was actually there for me. So I liked to have this group and do Bible study. And she didn't know that I was into that as a youth anyways. And the journey into digging into the Bible led me into just some questioning, who are those people in this book? There seems to be African tradition in there. Israel's actually on the African tectonic plate. And
Right.
so it's like, just right. And I remember like all of a sudden I had this conversation after a Bible study with another brother out there. His name was Elijah. And he's like, man, can you imagine how we would carry ourselves if we knew that we were in this book? And I was gobsmacked. I was like, what are you talking about? And then he played a video from KRS-One. Then I remembered this thing from the Malcolm X movie. And so I started to look into that deeper. And then I fell into a group of called African Israel, which I personally, I ended up stepping out of that group. The leader was, I feel I felt a bit misled as I started to get deeper into the group. I actually became a rabbi in that group, and I renounced my title and backed away, and that caused some trouble in the relationship as well. But we journeyed together. It was a journey of wanting to know the Most High, and I was earnest, not just by last name, but in heart, of wanting to take that journey. And I held to my intention, which actually brought me out of that group. But I still have an appreciation and reverence for the
Well, I
journey.
think sometimes you can get to a point where it no longer serves you, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
and that's okay.
And along the journey, I was every type of Christian. I mean, I got baptized so many times. Coming, I was like, oh, this is gonna bring me closer to Jesus. Okay, I'm in the water. I'm in the
I'm
ocean. I'm in the lake. I'm in the
I'm
pool.
in.
Yeah, I was like, okay, and my wife was with me on it because that was part of our vows, was to get to know each other and get to know the Most High and get to know Jesus. And so, we made the journey, and it ended up taking us in different directions. But I cherish it, and the discipline, I think, was really beautiful for me, and really getting to spend that time in the book, regardless of how things have been used one way or the other with us historically, but to develop my own journey with that, and to learn how to study, and to really try to put the wisdom from, say, Ecclesiastes or Proverbs, or even getting into the book Song of Songs, how that affected me. My mother introduced me to that book, and I was like, this is erotic.
Right,
And that was the door opening for me in my poetry as well, to be like, hey, Solomon can express himself the best.
right. The song,
He wrote
yeah.
this.
Solomon
Why
was,
don't I express
yeah.
myself? And it came out. Yeah.
And
And
so,
so the first book is Adult Love Psalms. That's what I called it.
oh, I didn't know that you had another book.
You may see that in the title.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay,
the Dawn of My Passion is a revisiting of the first book, which is Eddie
okay.
Lane, Adult Love Psalms. Yes.
And so the dawn of my passion. Now, listen, I write erotica myself, right? And I know
Yes.
the backlash you get. From a woman's perspective, it might be a little different. Um, but tell me how it was from a man's perspective when you decided that the dawn of my passion would be more erotic than romance.
Well, I'll give you some insight into the book. So
Okay.
the Dawn of My Passion is actually my progression. These are poems that I wrote to my second wife, I was having what some could call a Kundalini awakening, and I was in love at the same time. So there was so much going on there, and I just rode that wave. It was like my passion unfurled and opened up, and it was incremental. The first poems were, I didn't know her, I hadn't spoken to her, but she was on my mind. I wrote this in the front steps of my mother's place in Chicago, and I remember my mom coming in and interrupting me, but I was like, oh, I'm done with this one. And then the second one I wrote, and then by the third poem, I actually had, I think, got to go on a date with her. And so poem number
So this was an
4, I sat her down.
unrequited, listen, was this an unrequited love? Did she did not know that you were
It
in love
was,
with her?
she knew.
Oh, she knew.
I,
Okay.
the love came later. So
Okay. Okay.
when I recognized I was in love, I was navigating with my poems first, but then I would read them to her. So I
Okay.
remember the day that she told me. She told me she loved me on Christmas. Christmas in one of my friend's house in Hawaii, but the friends also live in Palm Coast. So we were all living in Hawaii at the same time. So it was just really beautiful. And yeah, I'm the kind of man that if I love someone, I just love someone, and I'm in it, and I don't feel bad about it. I've never been one to be bashful, because it's such a powerful thing to get to feel, and I'm aware that a lot of people don't open themselves up to it. So that means, like, I revel in it, and throughout the book you can see the progression. The poetry is kind of like, I'm feeling you. It's a little bit horny, like just that, hey, and then it progresses to actually getting to know her and appreciating other qualities. And so I let myself do that, and I would read these poems to her. And then before we got married, I decided I'm going to publish this book, and you have this as just a token of my affection to you, but also a statement. And my father was actually one of the first people to read it, and he was like, whoa. And my mother, and my mom was like, okay, son. I said, oof, all right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, it takes some, well, I let my grandmother read it, and she died when she was 102 years old. So when she read my first book, And she said, I could never say those things, but I'm glad you said them for me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And so I'm on book 4 now. But once I kind of got my shamans, right,
Mm-hmm.
blessing, then I said, okay, let the horse out the barn.
Let that horse out the barn.
Let the
This is
horse
a
out
part of
the
who we
barn.
are as human beings too. Yeah.
Let the horse
I
out the
think
barn.
it's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So I do understand acceptance. And it wasn't my mother or father, it was my grandmother that was more important to me for some reason, right? And I guess because that's where the root started, right? That's where your roots start. And so once she gave me permission to just go for it, then it makes it so much easier. Once they accept the fact that you are right, don't you think? Once you have some
Yeah.
sort of acceptance of what you're doing.
It plants a seed, creates a foundation. I think
Right.
it was really beneficial for me to have my father read and to honor me as a man expressing, because they knew I was coming from a place of love, but also it was nice for me to be able to show up in the fullness of my erotic nature, to speak, because some of it's crude starting off, but then I'm like, this isn't crude. This is just part of who I am. This is
Well,
me.
well, I don't know. Well, I personally don't think erotica is crude, right? Because I think erotica is what you do and what you think, and pornography is
Mm,
what you watch. It's really two different
beautiful.
things, right? It's really two different
Yeah, I
things.
agree with you on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so tell me
I
about
would
your
say my expression was
right.
less eloquent in the beginning. First it was like, oh, I'm thinking of your booty and you're
Right.
like this kind of thing. And then
Yeah.
going to be more poetic with, like speaking of her lotus and it
Right.
opening up and me getting a taste of nectar and like
Right.
using different phrases, but really still expressing from a deeply passionate place. Yeah.
Listen, I think most men should do more of that, right? Because it is a
I do too.
self-expression of love and honesty. And most men don't do that. And so this is very refreshing, right? To see someone who's willing to speak about the passion, and no matter how crude or rude or erotic that it is, it's the fact that you're having that conversation, not only with yourself, but with other people, right? So I think it'll be good to even talk about. I would love to have a male panel, you know, to see if
That
we
would be
could,
amazing.
to see if we could talk about why is it that you're unwilling to express how it feels to have oral sex with a woman that you love, right? And not be ashamed of it. But I don't know if I ever get a panel to do that. But I just think that they should open up more. Don't you?
I do, and you can definitely count me in on that panel because
Yes,
I
thank
love
you
what I
very
love.
much.
Yeah, and I know some brothers who are more expressive. I'm part of a lot of groups of what they call divine masculine, and just being able to cultivate us as men, showing up in the fullness of who we are, which is it's a group thing, but it's also an individual journey. You
Okay, so
know,
tell me what a divine masculine is.
well, so divine. Now we're speaking to the higher nature of us as beings, recognizing that yes, I'm in this physical body, but there's a deeply spiritual part to every aspect of myself,
Right.
and then honoring that, which then requires you to navigate and go into what's my purpose, what are my values, how am I, in relation to everything around me, how do I stand up in this world, how do I show up on a day-to-day basis, and what's the intention. So cultivating the intentionality behind that, and then also by virtue of that, being able to recognize and honor the divinity and the feminine that shows up in our life within
Hmm.
ourselves, and
Right.
then also within, by extension, within the women around us too. And that's a game changer in terms of how we interact with each other.
Tell me about
For
your
me, it has been.
tell me about your publishing experience.
My experience with the publishing was, I just, I let the books flow through me. I tried to format them, which is interesting to go back and forth. And then all of the books that I have so far, they're published on Amazon, self-publishing. So actually it wasn't that bad, but it's important to, do the editing, to go back and check things. And if I was to do it again, I would have liked to publish them in the physical form. I think that the next thing I'll do before the end of this year is go back and complete the other portion of publishing them in physical books. I thought people were going to let go of physical books, but I can't myself. I love something I can feel with my fingers, and just, like I develop a relationship with the pages. And it's funny because I've traveled so much, but I find myself even in my travels having about 3 or 4 books that go with me. Like Khalil Gibran's The Prophet is a book that I'll have with me. Even though it's on my Kindle, I like having it in book form. Yeah.
When I travel, there's always 3. There's 1 in my purse and 2 in the luggage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just how it is, right? Nice. I hope books don't go away. I mean, I don't have anything against Kindle, except that I can't go back to Kindle, right? I guess you can, but for me, if you have a book, you say, oh, let me go back here and look at that again and then come forward, right?
There's a big difference.
Yeah, and I like having a library in my home. I'm not sure why. I just think it's, for me, I think it's part of the process of growing up, right? When you're younger, you didn't have a library. We didn't have a library, right? Did you have a library in your home?
My dad's studious, so yeah, he had. Yeah. Dr. Albert had some books, so I began some of his books, and I was trying to figure out how to be a man, but they were all over the place. They weren't in just one spot, and so, I would say there were books, but I wouldn't call it a library. But now the way that he's set up, it's a library. He's got his bookshelf, and I'm the same way. The saddest part of leaving my place in Poipu, in Hawaii, when my last wife and I split up, I was just remembering like taking all my books off the shelf because I was so happy about my office. And I'm like, oh, I'm putting you in storage. I'm sending some of you to Florida. And we'll get together again. I have my library again. So it's probably one of the only things I want to have in the next place besides a place for my surfboard.
Gotta have a library. Gotta have a library. So tell me when the next book is coming out.
I'm working on another book that has to do with alchemy, intimacy, and poetry, and poverty. So I'm gonna take some time with this one. I love The Alchemist.
I think I've read it twice.
15.
Did you read it?
Oh, we're living it.
Oh yeah.
I read it. Yes. Yeah. It's a beautiful book, and like even now I'm stranded in the desert, so to say, but there's something special that you can take from it. And so I'm really seeking to put those principles into action and alchemize the things that are being presented to me. Or, in Christianity, maybe they call it grace and discernment and wisdom. And so I'm trying to take from my experience and then also cultivate a new relationship with everything that's surfacing right now.
Tell me the one book that changed your life besides the Bible.
The one book that was besides the Bible. The one book that changed my life, I would like to say, is the book by Khalil Gibran, The Prophet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books. And what it was is the insight it's jam-packed with so much heart. It's just, I could feel it inside. I remember when I got the book, I remember actually sitting my mom and my dad and my siblings down in the living room, and I read to them. I never did that. And I was like, can I just read this to you? And I read chapters on marriage and love and children. And I just feel like it reminded me of something that I already knew about life. And then it gave me a permission sort of to walk that path, because 1, it wasn't such a new path, but 2, it was resonant to me. How about you?
I'm not sure. You're asking me how I feel about the book?
Not so much Khalil Gibran's book, but like the book that was the one that was a game changer for you.
Oh, that changed my life. I would think it would be, I was in the intelligence community for a long time, right? So before I became part of the intelligence community, I read The Spook That Sat by the Door.
The Spook That Sat by the Door. That sounds curious.
Right. Yeah. So I would say that was the beginning. Yes. You've never read that? Put it on your reading list.
I've not read that.
Yeah,
no.
Put it on your
I'm gonna just put it in my notes right now. There's another book. If I can add another one, and this is funny because I found it at a garage sale in Palm Coast. So this book and it was erotica. So I was actually introduced to erotica in my teenage years, but I bought it because it was so small. The book is called The Delta of Venus. Have you heard of this?
No, but I'll write it down.
Beautiful,
Good stuff.
beautifully written. The Delta
Of
of
Venus.
Venus. Yeah, what a name too, right? I didn't
Right,
even
right.
recognize,
Yeah.
like, figure out that. But the book, I was turned on reading that book, and I didn't, I wasn't used to reading something and actually being stimulated by that in my imagination, and then going back years later and finding it and reading it again and being like, wow, this is really intense. So I think that book was also a low-key inspiration for my expression as well.
Yeah, I think that we all have those pivotal moments in a book that, for me, that
Yeah,
makes all the difference in the world, right? And you think, aha, that's what, okay, right? And so then when you look back on it, you think, dang it, that's good stuff, right? That's good stuff.
yeah.
So tell me your biggest mistake. Tell me about your biggest mistake.
I was thinking about that. My biggest mistake, I would say, has been not seeking to know myself, but outsourcing my pleasure. And
Outsourcing your
you know what I mean? Outsourcing
no,
it, meaning,
no.
like, as a man, seeking to find my mother in between the legs of other women.
Okay.
And like, so that, yeah. And also, so the remedy for that for me was to actually get to know myself, to learn, and I would even speak to self-pleasure as well, but like to really connect with this body and this frame and be grateful for it. So the mistake, I would say, which has turned into a lesson, was taking this physical frame for granted and not getting to know the magic that I have and that I can have just with myself alone and cultivate. And as a result of that, now I can bring something and share and, create an experience. But to know that I can have that with myself totally changed my journey in life. And, I didn't learn some of these things till after I was suicidal. So it wasn't until after things had fallen apart and I thought, let me start over again. And in that starting over again, let me get to know myself a little bit better too.
Let's talk a minute about your period of suicide. That
Yes.
is, that's a pivotal moment because you either make the turn or you don't, right? You either make the turn or
Yep.
you don't. So tell me what it was, I'm very glad it did,
Thank
that
you.
made the pivot, because a lot of people don't get to pivot. And if you don't make the pivot, then you're with God's grace, right? So tell
Yep.
me what
Yep.
it was that gave you the pivot.
Well, I'll just state this though. I was probably suicidal since the age of 9, and I mentioned it actually in the intro to this book, The Dawn of My Passion. I speak to it is that when I was young, I had already tried to commit suicide, but I ended up breaking the closet and getting in trouble. And so just navigating with that. By the time I came to that breaking point in Hawaii, where my mother had died, my wife had left me, the religion, I was backing away from that. Our businesses were gone. My relationship with family was strained. And even with my daughter, there was an estrangement there. It was just too much for me. And then my job sucked. And I'm in paradise unhappy. So my brother called me up. Right before I was literally, I was going to kill myself with my 740. I had a Beamer, 94 or 95 Beamer with the small little tailpipes that you can put, a hose on. And I was going to go do that. I had the car running and I was just exhausted. I had to break down in the park, go upstairs. And back then I was still practicing the Israelite stuff. So I had my prayer mat. I just collapsed on the prayer mat and I was like, God, if you got something for me, now's the time. Otherwise, once I get up, I'm done with this. And I laid back and like I had the phone in my pocket and I went to move it and it rang and it was my brother. And my brother, I didn't know him to be one who was, you know, uh,
Spiritually
therapeutically savvy.
connected? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he called. I think he called to complain about some of his own stuff, but I just broke down when I spoke to him and told him where I was at, and he was like, "Okay, let's just take this one step at a time." So what I did was I committed. Okay, we'll do this step, and I'm gonna just. It was literally a crawl for me to say, "All right, I won't kill myself today." But what I didn't tell him was I just gave myself 3 years. I was like, I'm gonna say my goodbyes to everyone, and I'll just kill myself in 3 years. And I'm you know, I know I reached the point, I crossed the point where I was like, all right, here's what I'll do. I'll figure things out. I'm going to see the world and see if it's worth it to be here. And if it's not, then at least I will have said goodbye. And there would have been a buffer since my mother died, you know, for my family. Cause it's a selfish thing as well. When you feel like you're backed against the wall and you don't have anything and it doesn't matter, which is obviously not true. And my father tells me, son, if you would have killed yourself, it would have been such a horrible thing. I introduced my father to his new wife, you know, and so not like maybe it would have happened anyways, but like so many of these things that unfolded since then, I'm really glad that I didn't do it. And what I've experienced of life has been epic. So the turning point was a decision and action, but it wasn't easy. And I probably still struggled for about 1.5 years. And then I came to a point where I was like, no, there's a purpose for me here. Let me dig into that and remove everything that was going on in my head, you know, that wasn't my voice, and take it from there and show up.
See, I find that extremely hard to believe. First of all, you're a young man who's a physicist, right? You're a young Black man who's a physicist, a young man who has traveled the world, right? Who has had the experience of being at one of the best colleges, had the experience of being in love and loss, had the experience of the journey of religion and opening your third eye, and not only touching your masculine side, but your feminine side, and then wanting to commit suicide. To me, that is just not something you would do, right? I mean, just
you'd be surprised, you know, because there's like when you've experienced all those things and it still doesn't feel like it's anything, and you're in a place where you're not connecting with people, or you're in an unhealthy relationship. There's more to my journey than, you know, that, but just really being deeply unhappy. There are many people who we would think would be wealthy. Think about like Robin Williams, who brought so much joy in his funniness, you know, to the world, but he still ended up committing suicide. So
but he was a
it can
manic
be hard.
depressive.
I was depressed too.
No, he was a
been
manic
carrying
depressive.
depression since.
Oh, right.
Manic. Oh, okay. Yes.
Right.
I just feel like there's a lot of mental health things that definitely go unspoken to in our demographic. And there's the bravado and the pride. And I would never have gone to seek help for that. I just kept trying to fight through it. And then you'd make it to the next day and something cool would happen and you'd push on. But it was the undercurrent, you know.
Was
there
it
was an
hereditary?
undercurrent in my journey.
Was it hereditary?
I could say that, yeah. Yeah, there is depression on my mother's side of the family as well. So epigenetics more so, you know, and just repeating voluntary things. So for me, my journey was also healing lineal trauma. That's what brought me to Africa, was connecting with my ancestors. My mother was a part of that. My grandmothers were a part of that, you know. Yeah.
Your greatest accomplishment?
My greatest accomplishment? I want to say is defeating that yearning to kill myself, moving beyond that. Yeah.
The pivot.
The pivot was, I think, my greatest accomplishment, because then it opened the door for me to see the beauty and the majesty and the wonder in this world. I was speaking to it before, I was feeling it a little bit here and there, but it really allowed me to taste it, to really taste it, to feel like life, I could make love to life. And so it couldn't have happened without that pivot.
So tell us, how can we get a copy of your book?
The book is on Kindle right now, Amazon Kindle, okay. And I'll commit to making it, you know, paperback publishable by the end of this year.
Yay!
It's just a little bit more work, even if I have to pay someone to do it for me.
Right.
You know, I'll make it happen. And if you look up Ezriyah Ben Ernst, or if you go to lakoji.com, there is the Rites of Passage literature, and all 4 of my books are located there, and that'll take you to Amazon as well.
So you're transformative on your website. If someone were to book a session with you, do you come to them or they come to you? You do it over Zoom? How do you do that?
I've been doing it over Zoom or over whatever medium allows us to just meet face to face, you know, and because of COVID, like, we haven't been able to get together. So right. An in-person session is I think it's beautiful, you know, and I'm looking forward to doing more of those as things change. Because I do intuitive massage as well. I've taken Thai massage. I'm a Ho'oponopono practitioner, which is just a modality for self-cleaning, but you're connecting energetically with people. And then I do energy work as well. And and I do sound healing. And I have Healy technology. So I'm really looking forward to what I get to bring, whether it's just the next retreat. You know, the last retreat I held was in Bali, Indonesia, where I had a bunch of masseuse come in and we did medicine. We had an indigenous medicine. One of the shamans who worked on me brought stuff called kambo, which works with your lymphatic system. And we did a diet. You know, it was really beautiful, beautiful moment to share of cleansing and healing and to do that together as a group. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the one-on-one. But the work right now is all online.
Okay. And so does anybody have a question for him before we're at the 9 o'clock hour? Any questions? Linda?
Yes, I'm so excited because I read Gilran and I love him. The Prophet was my favorite book. I have all 4 of his books right here, and I read them whenever
beautiful.
I get a little down or I need something to pick me up or But I mean, I think you're a heavy young brother, and I'm excited for you, and I'm looking forward to all the things that you're going to accomplish in this life. And I'm so glad you didn't hurt yourself. And
Oh, I know, right? Yeah.
stay with us.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us.
I will stay with you. I'm with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, do you have a question?
I don't.
Yes.
You, my friend, are incredible. And I am so grateful that you pivot. I am so grateful because you have a wealth of knowledge to share with the world. And if you're ever in any doubt of how to connect, who to connect to, you need to reach out to me because there are groups and groups of people throughout this world
That's right.
you need to touch.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, it feels good. I received that, and I would love to keep in touch with all of you, especially in coming back to Palm Coast. I have Bunnell and Palm Coast have a special place in my heart, and so I keep it in the back of my mind. At some point, I'd like to come back and contribute. The last time that I was in Florida, I did. Miss Chandler, are you in Florida?
I live in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, see, there you go.
And I'm originally from Stark, Florida, which is about 2 hours from Palm Coast.
Right.
And I have tons of family in Orlando and Daytona. My uncle's funeral was Friday in Daytona. But I still have 3 uncles and 3 aunts in Daytona and around 27 cousins.
I'm in Ormond.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm in Ormond.
In Ormond, okay.
Yes, I'm not too far from where you are. So you can come back in January to Donna's Fresh Book Festival.
I would love him to come back. I
would love to make it back as well. That'd be nice, and it'd be nice to meet up with all of you. I've got some family in Atlanta too. I haven't spent any time in Atlanta, so that's on my list, is to come out that way.
Are you going back to Hawaii, or are you going to be in the West Coast?
I'm gonna be on the West Coast for a project, and then I'd like to, get to my wife. She's in Australia, so I'd like to get out there once the Australian government opens it up, and I'll probably be between, Hawaii, Florida, Bali, Indonesia, which has become, a second home to me. But I'm a surfer, so it's perfect for my surf tastes and inspiration, and then come back to the States.
Maybe we should move Fresh to Bali, Linda.
Oh, for sure.
You certainly, hey, if you want to do something like that while I'm there, it's definitely doable. I'm connected enough.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Something like that off. That would be wonderful.
Love that. Yeah. Okay, is there anything else you want to share with us this evening before we say goodbye?
As a final note, I think, I just want to thank you again for reaching out and for inviting me and for connecting me with these 2 beautiful women as well as yourself.
Well, you're connected with more than these 2 beautiful women, believe me. Once it uploads on my Facebook page, it'll be,
beautiful. And I'm open to anyone reaching out. I specifically want to work with our demographic in terms of the intimacy coaching, because the intimacy isn't just a sexual thing. It's a spiritual, intellectual, mental, physical, there's conflict, intimacy. So I think it has a really beautiful place in healing. And I've brought that back to the matriarchs in my family and been able to work with them as well, which that's a great honor for me. And, so I see this place in our community with men and women. I work with men in Africa. I mean, I'm doing international work with this,
Right.
and I'm really loving how people are unfolding. And so I've got it set up in so many ways to that if you want to invest in yourself, we can do this and we can navigate and see what that looks like and set up some principles and just a new paradigm to walk in. That's the transformation. So I would encourage everyone, whether it's connecting with me through that form or utilizing the books, because they're set up in a way to help you navigate intimacy with self, with partner, with nature, to take the leap and get to know yourself and honor yourself, the divinity within you, and see how that permeates outside. And I'm here. So if you need to reach out and you want to take the journey, I'm very open with what I've been through on my journey. And I would like people to benefit from me still being around here. And I'm very encouraged by getting to speak with and meet you ladies. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that it was difficult to just stranded in the desert. And you
it's a pleasure. This is the highlight of my stranding. Yeah.
You could have said, Donna, listen, I'm stranded in the desert. We're not doing this. So right. So I certainly appreciate you taking the time and being so honest about your journey. It's I don't know how we met, and I don't really care. I don't know how that really happened, but there's a reason.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah, right? There's a reason for everything. And so we'll keep in touch, and we will upload this phenomenal interview online, and we'll see you again. Thank you for being here.
I'll see you soon.
Aloha.
Aloha to you ladies.
Aloha.
Be careful.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I will be careful.
Okay. Good night.
Good
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.